Well, good day. Good day and welcome to Mental Health and You. I'm your host, Cynthia Timms. Thank you so much for being a part of this experience of mental health and you in this a new year, 2022. My goodness, we reached another year, 2022, but it seems like the same old, same old. We're still in a pandemic. We're still dealing with so much trauma, so much heartache, so much misery. But hopefully, we're still dealing with some hope. And peer support, hope is the catalyst of so much. We say hope is the catalyst of recovery. But in this segment, in this show, we're going to particularly talk about hope and the trauma, particularly of Black women in the pandemic, Black women in mental health. And to help me kind of sort out this thing that we're in, this ever lasting thing, hopefully not everlasting. It's Cecilia Brown, peer support advocate, peer supporter.
Hi, Cynthia. Good
Hello.
afternoon.
Good afternoon, Cecilia. Thank you so much for joining me today, joining us.
Sure, sure.
Um, when we had preliminary talks about this subject just the other day, you
Mhm.
brought it up, and it's always important. There's no easy time to talk about mental health, particularly with women of color.
Right.
Why is this important to you, particularly in this moment that we find ourselves in?
Well, it's important to me because I'm an African American woman, Black woman, and my wellness is very important. And I think it's important that, particularly during this time in 2022, is that Black wellness, Black self care is important. And I see it more now because the pandemic has you seeing things crystal clear. I mean, this has always been around that, Black women were always seen as a strong
Yes.
woman and they had to be strong for themselves, for their family, and their relationships, with their friends, in employment.
Hmm.
And I think that, it's tiring.
Yes.
I have to say that I'm tired of being the one that's always strong all the time. I mean, I am strong, and that's not going to change. But sometimes I need my own self care, and I need to figure out ways how I'm going to be in the world, and particularly around peer support. I'm seeing this more with my Black women peer supporters who are doing so much and not really getting the recognition that they could get, or even getting the support, from their fellow peers. I don't see that happening as much, and I think that this has been happening for a while, and they sort of just kind of cope with it. But I think it's even harder now. There's a lot of grief now. We're in the world that's I can't even describe it, but it's just not a very supportive. There's so many politics. There's just so much going on. Um, our voting rights are being taken away, and
Yes.
it's like we're going back.
Cecilia, before,
Sure.
you said some things. Peer support, particularly for us Black women in this world, in the midst of so much. I think it would be remiss if we didn't discuss how systematic racism has played a role in it. We
Yes.
talk about self care, and that's important. That's
Hmm.
what we try to do on this show. But
Yes.
self care in the midst of what you just talked about, mentioned, in the midst of this world, as you put it, this world of voter suppression, this world of us as Black women, particularly trying to be everything to everyone,
Hmm. Hmm.
often to the neglect of ourselves.
Right. Right.
So can you kind of expand on that? But that's interesting and so relevant. Peer
Yes.
support in the midst of we're trying to take care of ourselves, but there's what institutional racism,
Yeah.
systematic racism. This pandemic has really put a light on it, put a spotlight in healthcare, in housing,
Hmm.
voter suppression.
Yeah.
And you want to talk more about that? Where were you going with that? Thank you.
Well, um, like you said, in healthcare and
Hmm.
voting rights, we really have to be in self care in order to fight that. I
Yes.
find that out with myself.
Hmm.
So if we're not doing self care and finding ways to be well, we're not going to be able to fight systematic racism because we can get together and we could, form a strategy to fight systematic racism, which is no hard.
Hmm.
It's a very hard thing to chip away at, but we could chip away at it. But we need, people around us that support us. We can't do it alone. For instance, if we're dealing with healthcare, if we're dealing with some health
Yes.
issues, we need information about it, and that can come from other Black women and peer who are involved with peer support. Because sometimes we go to the doctor and we don't have the right questions to ask. We
Hmm.
don't advocate for ourselves because we don't feel
Right.
like we could. But if we have peer supporters and Black women around us, we'll be able to ask questions of the doctor. What is the diagnosis? What is the treatment? Um, and sometimes we don't know how to advocate because we don't feel like we're worthy of that. You know,
Yes.
yeah. So what I try to do, just with my family, is I try to, because I'm in the mental health field, I try to uh, advocate with them. Explain to them that this is their, um, this is their bodies, this is their health, and the doctor is a partner in your, health care. So rather than going to the doctor or even in mental health, you are in charge of your own recovery. You're in charge of your wellness. And the doctor is there to be helpful and has the expertise, but you're working in partnership. So you're not giving him, how you feel, and you need to
Yes.
a way to explain it to the doctor or to the social worker, or, of how you're feeling. And you have a right to. You're not invisible. And sometimes I
Hmm.
think that Black women feel invisible, so they don't ask these questions of the health professionals.
You said something interesting again. We don't ask these questions.
Hmm.
And it's been my experience in my work as in peer support that oftentimes peers look at these doctors and therapists with this godlike complex.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, yeah,
like how dare I ask this person with all these titles in their background, all these titles at the end of their name.
right,
They got to know more than me. You
right.
know, I have all these, I dare say, things going on, these afflictions going on. I'm on medication. I have this diagnosis. Maybe I've never been taught how to speak up for myself.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe I've never been validated in that way. My
yes.
feelings haven't been empathized with.
Hmm. Hmm.
My thoughts haven't been empathized or taken into consideration.
Right.
So, how can we educate? What can be done going forward to like maybe change the tide of this? How
Well,
can peer support specifically when it comes to Black women?
well, I think that peer support specifically for Black women is we have to acknowledge. that
Mm-hmm.
we need peer support like everyone else. And our
Yes.
peer support might look different than
Yes.
it does generally. And I'm not taking away from, others who are not Black women who do peer support. I salute you. But for Black women, we have layers and layers of issues like trauma, like dealing with family, like dealing with grief and loss, especially in a pandemic, being heard and not being visible. So what I think we can do is we can get some people that support us, like maybe Cynthia, me and you can support each other, or there's other people,
Mm-hmm.
just a small for now, people that you know and trust that are Black women or women of color who support you. Start there, and talk things out with some people you trust to get peer support. Whatever's going on with you, because we know what best
Yes.
supports us, but we need
Yes.
other Black women to sort of validate it as well.
Yes.
So, and once they do that, then we could go out into the world with systematic racism and everything that's happening, and we would be armed with knowledge and support and love from our fellow Black women peer supporters.
You said something. We will be armed with that support because, tell you the truth, Celia, I don't think systematic racism is going anywhere anytime soon. I
Yeah,
mean, this
yeah,
country, this nation was built on racism. It's in
yes.
the DNA, it's in the bloodstream,
Hmm.
it's in the cells of this country.
Yes.
We're going to take a break. We're going to run a PSL. But on the other side, let's explore that how more we as women of color, we as Black women, can support each other. In what ways can we do that, even in the midst of all this? So we'll be back to mental health and you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
And you're very welcome. We'll be back to mental health and you on the other side with Miss Cecilia Brown, peer support specialist. Thank you.
My mother was always very familiar with her neighborhood, but one day she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. And she didn't know whether she should go forward or turn, and she wasn't even really sure where she was at. It was very unsettling for her.
I felt so much better after my son told me, "Mom, I don't want you to worry or be afraid. I'll be there for you and we'll figure it out."
Good day. Welcome back to Mental Health and You. I'm your host, Cynthia Timms. I'm going to come back with my guest now, Miss Cecilia Brown, as we try to unravel this this epidemic, this pandemic within our community, particularly when it comes to Black women and mental health. I mean, Cecilia, I think sometime, about our ancestors,
Yes.
my mother, grandmother,
Hmm.
coming up from the South, dealing with things like Jim Crow, dealing with things when like racism that was so in your face. Whites only this, whites only that. Being
Hmm.
called the N word, being called the B word,
Yeah.
like it was their name. Being
Mhm.
called a girl when you're dealing with a grown woman.
Yeah.
You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I do.
Um, and yes, we have come a long way. I believe we got to acknowledge that we stand on the shoulders of women who fought the battles in
Mm.
those days. Our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunties.
Yes.
But it's not over. We've come a long way, but
Yes.
still in the midst of that, we still have a ways to go.
Yes. Yes.
So the question was, before we went to break, how can we get creative? How can we get more resourceful when it comes to finding and securing resources for Black women of color? Yes, you talked about being able to speak to each other, but sometimes I dare say, Celia, even that's an issue among ourselves.
Yeah.
the trust
Well,
factors. But what recommendations coming from you can we? How can we deal with that?
well, one, you said something very important about our ancestors and Black women, and I'm always thinking of my grandparents or my aunts, and
Hmm.
sometimes I go back and I talk to them and just ask them, I pray and ask for their wisdom, because they're always with you. So it's
Yes.
good to go back and see what would they have done, what would they have said. I think that's very empowering for us as Black women. In terms of resources, there's many resources. I just looked up on the uh, internet on
Hmm.
resources for Black women, and they're all out there. It's just they're not being shared with us. No one's looking at them unless you go and you seek and find them. So what I would do is create like let me say like a list serve, um and just put resources in. I know it's hard for us sometimes to talk and we don't always have the energy, but maybe what can be healing is some of these Black women resources that are out there. We can send links. People can look at it, or Black women can look at it at their leisure,
Hmm.
that they're aware that they're not alone. One thing is sometimes you feel alone in this world, and especially as a Black woman. But if you know that there's other Black women, peer supporters or different professionals, really working on wellness and self-care, that makes you feel supported.
Yes. Make you feel supportive. I know in my journey in peer support, I think I've become more conscious of that, seeking out people, seeking out women who can empathize with me, who can validate me.
Yes.
I can't begin to tell you how many past maybe doctors and therapists I've had to let go because I felt that my concerns were not being validated or they
Yes.
were being minimized and marginalized.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So finding a supportive system, finding a supportive wherever it is, as long as it's good. I think that's so important. Whether it's, a support group in a house of worship, in a
Yeah.
school, in an after center, in somebody's home,
Mm-hmm.
online in these days still,
Oh, yeah.
a Zoom call. I know a lot of us are so tired of Zoom, but it serves a purpose, particularly in these times, because it keeps us connected in a way that we need to be connected.
Yeah. Um, what I when these things happen, my way of dealing with
Yes.
racism and other things, is trying to create something.
Yes.
So if you feel and our audience feels that getting support by one way is creating an email list of Black women for peer support, I can certainly work on that. It's something that we could have, and then everybody could just share resources when they need to, you know,
Mm,
know that they're being supported. And then
absolutely.
at times, like you said, we if there's a Zoom call to get together, we could do that. I
Hmm.
think so much sometimes it's even hard to get the support um, for Black women because we feel like we have to be in this, we have to do this, and we really sometimes are not able to. But and because of the racism, because of oppression, that keeps us from doing that. But if we feel inspired and supported by Black women, we will be able to join like a Zoom support call or meeting. You
Oh,
know,
absolutely. I totally agree. And I also would find out or think about what interests you.
yeah,
What is it that brings you alive or makes you feel good even in the midst of stuff?
yes, yeah,
Nature, a book club, writing.
Mm-hmm.
a movie club.
Right.
Maybe find some type of group, or if you don't find some type, or maybe start a group. I
Yeah.
know there are black groups, black female groups
Right.
that are dedicated to these type of activities.
Yes, they are.
And I know I follow some of them online. Just a writing group.
Mm-hmm.
There's a group for hiking. There's a group for, yes, nature.
Right.
What is it that brings you?
Mm.
What is it that makes you feel real again? What makes you feel alive again? So,
Yes.
yes.
Yes. Those are questions. Those are really good questions, and I ask myself that too. Sometimes I
Hmm.
get off of and need to focus. What makes me feel good? What makes me feel alive?
Yes.
What are things that I could do in this time of uncertainty and of the pandemic and racism? And I think we have to continue to do that, just like we continue to eat and drink water.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
To give
Yes.
each other fuel as
Yes.
we have to support
Yes.
each other like it's fuel.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. Cecilia, I was want to share with you and the listening audience. I was watching a movie not too long ago. It was on TV. It triggered so many emotions, and
Hmm.
women of the movement
Oh yes.
that
Yeah.
talked about Mamie Till, the mother of Emmett Till.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
I must say, that triggered so much. You're talking about black women.
Hmm.
You're talking about the strength. You're talking about a support system. You're talking about tragic, unimaginable tragedy. And how this woman at a time where this type of brutality,
Yes.
was much more of a common thing. We saw George Floyd in life. We
Yeah.
saw George Floyd,
Hmm.
and some of us saw, the guy in the Staten Island,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Eric,
Um,
Eric Warner.
yes, Warner, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these are somebody's sons.
Hmm.
These are somebody's nephews. These are somebody's maybe husbands. These are somebody's fathers.
Hmm.
So I say that to say, when I watched this movie and I thought about the strength of this woman, you talking about our ancestors.
Yeah.
I remember meeting her many years later
Oh really? Wow.
as a photographer at the National Action Network when I was a photographer there.
Yeah.
The National Action Network, for those who don't know, is a civil rights organization,
Yes.
and in New York, based out of New York here. And I met her as she came to speak when they had a program about mothers who had lost children.
Hmm.
And she had such a regalness about her. And, and I could only imagine. And that retelling of the stories so triggered me.
Yeah.
But think about the courage that this woman had
Yes.
to be able to say, I want the world to see what the world did to my son.
Yes.
And that triggered the civil rights movement, triggered a movement.
Yes.
This was just a few weeks before the Montgomery bus boycott.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
remember reading somewhere where Rosa Parks, another hero,
Yes.
said that she was thinking about Emmett Till when she decided to sit on that bus and
Yeah.
stay seated,
Yeah.
because enough was just enough.
It's enough. It
It's
really
enough.
is.
And
I,
so I think about those ancestors again, those
yes.
women, those strong black women who, it's just did so much and carried
Yes.
the water for us and did all these things
Hmm.
in the midst of so much. So as you were saying, I'm sorry, I just wanted to put that
No,
out
no,
there because we come
glad,
from strong
you know
Vegas.
what? I'm
Yes.
so glad you put it out because my mother grew up in civil rights and Jim Crow, and
Mm-hmm.
he remembers Emmett Till's what happened. And she was sick to her stomach about it.
Mm-hmm.
But in the same time, I hear her fight, my mom's fighting spirit, that we have a right to live and to be on this earth, and you don't have a right to take our lives. Just
Yes.
like Emmett Till, and I have to keep reminding myself and reminding other people. Um, you have no right to decide who lives and dies as a Black person. So, George Floyd should still be here. Emmett Till should
Yes.
be here. Eric Warner. And these are
Yes.
really tragedies that expand generations.
Yes.
But we'll hear about, or now hearing about Emmett Till, and they're going to be hearing about George Floyd and Eric Warner and Sandra Bland and
Yes.
everyone. That this is not. This is a tragedy, and it's not right to kill us. Why is it still happening to us?
You said something, and I want to say their name. I want to say her name, Sandra Bland. I
Yeah,
want to say Breonna Taylor.
right, right.
I could have been Breonna Taylor. I could have been Sandra Bland. You could have been
Yes,
our sisters, our mothers, you know what I'm saying? Our daughters,
yeah.
our nieces.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we have a works to go. We have a task ahead of us. We have
Yes.
systematic racism, but in the midst of that, as we start to wrap up,
Okay.
we got to take care of ourselves.
Right. And we can't act as if
Yes,
that's not important. It's
yes,
important that we take time out just to breathe for 5 minutes.
yes, to breathe. If breathing means just walking out on this cold day in New York City
Yes.
and walking through the snow and
Yeah.
smelling that good air,
Yeah.
that's okay. If taking care of ourselves means I want to stay in bed today and watch some TV, you
Right.
know, I want to stay in bed today and just take care of me.
And give
I
yourself permission to do
Yes,
it. You
yes,
don't have to
indeed.
get up and do chores right now. You could do it later,
Yes,
but you don't have to do it right now. Self-care is the most important thing for Black women's wellness. I
self
just
care.
self-care.
Celia, I want to thank you so much for being a part of Mental Health and You, being part of this important discussion that we need to have, and we got to do it again.
Yes.